Welcome to Business Owner Tales from the Trenches, the podcast for business owners who want to see around corners and thrive financially. Your host is Carr, CEO and business owner at CornerCap. Tune in every other week for lessons learned from the trenches of entrepreneurship, business successes, and financial independence. Here's Cannon.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to the show. Cannon Carr here and Claudia Bettinger. We have a fun episode. Claudia, today we're going to be asking that classic question to an entrepreneur. What do you wish you knew then that you know now? And we'll hear about how so many great practical insights into how would I have started my business 10 years ago in so much better shape. And it's really insightful. We're excited to bring it to you. Claudia, why don't you introduce our guest?
Yeah, today we have Scott Regan on the podcast, who's the founder of LeadWorks. He began his career as a sports journalist turned marketing VP, who then opened up his own tech business. After selling that, he started his marketing firm, LeadWorks, where he works with a variety of industries, including the retail aesthetics industry, beverages, consumer brands, and healthcare.
Yeah, he's done a lot of work with a lot of different industries, built some great marketing expertise. But a couple quick points we want people to keep in mind as they listen to this episode. First, just listen to this, how Scott transitioned from what we'll call the corporate world to the entrepreneurial world. And he actually did it in two different ways. But so many of the entrepreneurs we talk to go from corporate to entrepreneur later in life and make it successful. So that's an interesting journey to hear. The second thing is all about how he had to unlearn some bad habits that he started when he started his business, just trying to survive, right? Just trying to survive, do great work. He was working so much in the business that he said, oh my goodness. At one point he woke up and he said, I have totally forgotten, what's important in making this succeed. And he walks through 3 or 4 key things that are going to be great lessons for entrepreneurs to, when they're starting out, to remember not to do. And then the third thing is how he brings all that experience of what he had to unlearn and do better to certain segments. In particular, we'll highlight today the health and retail aesthetics industry.
Right.
There's so many things he said that were similar to his journey that he sees now and can uncover to help in his marketing work. And similar with us too. We work in that industry too. To help them be better marketers in a competitive way and ultimately build and grow a better business as a practitioner. So it's a great episode, very, very fun. You'll enjoy it. If you want to learn more about the work we do, you can always visit cornercap.com, where we talk about our 3 R's framework to help business owners achieve financial independence. And in particular, this episode is all about that difference between financial success and business success, because they always go hand in hand, although it's ideally perfect when you make them both succeed. So with that, we'll go ahead and jump into the episode with Scott Regan. Scott, thanks for joining the program. I'm excited. We've got so much to cover. I love how, your journey to business owner and entrepreneur, I'd say at first glance isn't traditional, but in many respects, I think there is method to the madness. We'll get to that. But first, I just wanted to ask, you've you had a good long career working for large organizations, leading divisions of businesses. But did you always want to become an entrepreneur?
It's been in my blood. And I always, even when I was working for large organizations, Cannon, I always had my toe in the entrepreneurial water. Early in my career, when I was at the Medical University of South Carolina in Charleston, I actually had a little PR firm on the side. And so I was always kind of dipping in there, always wanting to go out on my own. And the reason I never really did was family considerations. I wanted to make sure that I could provide for my wife and my 2 children, but it never got rid of the urge for me to actually be my own boss.
So LeadWorks was the first real venture you started on your own, right? Or you ran a PR, you said you had some side gigs for a little bit?
Before that, I left hospital administration at the end of 2006 and went out and just decided to be a consultant. I was doing strategic planning, operational planning, marketing consulting. Did that for a number of years. Did well, but struggled. You never knew it was feast or famine. But out of that, I actually started a tech company, a strategic planning cloud-based software company, raised several rounds of venture capital, and moved to Atlanta to grow that company. And that was from 2009 to 2013. I exited that company at the end of 2013 and sold my stake in it and turned around and said, hey, what am I going to do now? And kind of just trying to figure it out. A friend came to me and asked if I could do some lead generation automation work for him. And that was the genesis of LeadWorks in 2014.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I actually didn't realize you had a precursor there. And let's just pause for a minute. That 4-year tech strategic consulting venture, did that materialize the way you wanted it to? Were there disruptions along the way? And did you sell at the time you wanted to? Just all in a 2-minute nutshell there.
There were a lot of lessons learned there. And I learned I did not want to be a tech CEO. Yeah. And, technology companies need to raise a lot of capital. And the moment you raise that first round, a round of capital would cover us for about a year. I went from overnight being a one-man show to having 20 people on the 10th floor of what was then the SunTrust Bank building down in Buckhead, very high rent district.
Know it well. Yeah.
And we had half of the 10th floor, and we're paying a big nut to the landlord, and with a lot of salaries trying to keep tech guys happy. This was, they needed ping pong tables and pinball machines and a refrigerator full of food just to keep them happy, because you have Google and Amazon and Yahoo all hiring down there, AT&T, everybody else. Yeah. So we'd raise one round of capital, and I'd start the second round. I'd start looking for the next round, knowing I had a year to raise another round. And so the stress was actually unbelievable. You're always worried about running out of money, and you're burning through cash in those early days. And then the board, which was half of the investors and half of the management team, had disagreements over the long-term direction of the company and the software. And so it just was, after a couple of years, it just wasn't fun. So did I exit when I wanted to exit? Not really. Did I exit when I needed to exit? Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. And I look back on it and I don't regret it at all.
Yeah. Well, that's great. A great journey. And that, I'm sure that informed a little bit about how you were going to run LeadWorks and what brought you satisfaction there. But last question, I mean, when you look back over the corporate career, did that prepare you well for that first venture and then ultimately what became LeadWorks?
Yeah, it did to an extent. And the extent being, it gave me a lot of management skills and a lot of negotiation skills, a lot of sales skills. So, when I was running a hospital, you're spending a lot of time with the board and the medical staff, and you're always trying to build relationships in those situations. You're trying to, medical staff, you generally don't control what they do in the hospital. So you're trying to find that happy medium of trying to make them happy and still make sure the hospital is profitable and doesn't go under. So it was always so I learned a lot of skills around how to get people on the same page, aligned to the same vision, marching in the same direction. That prepared me well. What I wasn't prepared for was going from an organization in which I had a lot of people who were doing the work. And, the moment I got into a tech company, I still started surrounding myself with who's, because I'm not a programmer. I had ideas, so I had to hire people. I hired the marketing team. I hired the sales team. And then when I started LeadWorks, I kind of forgot all of that. And this was, I look back, I said, what was the big mistake I made in launching LeadWorks? I didn't surround myself with a bunch of who's. I said, I'm going to figure out how to do this. I'm going to figure out how to do this all myself. And the growth was slower than it would have been if I would have had the confidence to just dive in and make the investment on people who knew a lot more about what I was doing than I did. And that was always the secret of my success. When I was running a hospital, when I was running the tech company, was I hired people who were a lot smarter than me in the areas they needed to be smart in. And I sat back and I supported them. I said, tell me what you need to do your job really well, and I'm going to support you. And boy, that was a great strategy. And people always ask me, say, aren't you afraid that somebody's going to take your job? I said, why would I be afraid of that? I said, I think my board thinks I'm the most brilliant guy in the world for hiring some really, really brilliant people who all could have had my job.
Right.
But the board saw me more as a leader who was able to build a team rather than being the knowledge-based guy who had to do all those things. So I wish I would have, I learned those lessons when I was there. I didn't really, I never applied them when I started LeadWorks because I didn't have a game plan when I started LeadWorks, quite honestly.
Yeah.
It was just I was helping out a friend and I didn't, and I had no design that LeadWorks was actually going to do anything beyond that one project when I started.
Oh, you kind of just started to fill an immediate need, right? Which often happens, right? You to solve an immediate problem for somebody, generate some revenue. But right, the end game not defined.
It was clearly not defined. I realized very quickly that what I was doing for him could be replicated, and there was a great need. And so in the early days of LeadWorks, we were building very sophisticated marketing automation, lead generation systems for primarily tech companies and consulting firms, B2B. And using automation, you can scale a lot of things a lot easier. And I realized, wow, there's actually a market for this because back then, marketing automation wasn't nearly as sophisticated as it is now. The internet wasn't as sophisticated as it is now. There's things you can do with internet-based computing that just wasn't possible 10 years ago. So what we were doing was actually a little bit revolutionary in trying to put all this together. But so I said, hey, you know what? Anybody wants me to build them a lead gen engine, I'll do it. And so it was more of not by design. It was just by more luck and happenstance and serendipity that the company grew in those early days. Yeah.
And you and I've talked about the book Who Not How by Dan Sullivan. It's a great book. It helps many things. And you've brought it up here as an example of you'd always been able to lead people, the who's doing the work, and then starting on your own. I'll say it sounded like you maybe not forgot that principle, but you just jumped in, maybe baptism by fire, and just figured, yes, we'll get these projects done. When did you realize working in the business as much as you were doing was starting to handicap working on the business and being able to actually have a growth plan?
Well, I kind of learned that about 2 or 3 years in. I had hired a couple of folks. It never worked out. The only rule I put on LeadWorks was we were never going to have office space. We're never going to have overhead. I just exited a tech company that we're paying $20,000 a month in rent, and we weren't making $20,000 a month in revenue. And the stress of that, and I left there, and I thought, why do I need all these programmers and QBs on the 10th floor of the SunTrust Bank building? They could all be working out of their homes. Why are we doing this? It was. So I had that awakening,
and that was pre-pandemic, right? That was
this was
before
2011. So I had this epiphany, this awakening of what corporate America should look like, almost a full decade before the pandemic drove the need. So my only objective, I said, whoever I hire, we're gonna be completely virtual. We're going to create all of our systems so they're in a virtual environment, which means I can hire the very best talent from anywhere. It doesn't matter where they live. I don't have to relocate people, and I'm not handicapped by hiring in a single market. So but that brings trials and tribulations as well, because when you're hiring virtual people, there has to be those relationships are largely based on trust. You don't, I hope that person's actually in the office today doing work for me, providing value to our clients. And it didn't always work out. I had to figure out how to actually hire people who could work in a virtual environment. And that was really hard in those days. A lot easier today, because almost everybody that I'm looking at to hire has worked in a virtual environment. They're all, service-based kind of folks. They're programmers, they're writers, they're marketing people. And most of these people, whether they're working for Coca-Cola or an ad agency, they're all working from home just about. So that whole desire to work at home is easy to find. Finding people who have a track record, who are self-starters, who are trustworthy. So, I knew it, and, I had some false starts in hiring people 2014, 2015. I did hire my daughter straight out of college, and she graduated from Kennesaw State with a marketing degree in 2015. And I had just let a couple of people go, and I convinced her to work for me for the summer while she was waiting for a job offer to come in. And from a company she really wanted to work for. And so, the company dragged its feet. It took them 6 months to make Whitney an offer. By that time, she kind of saw what LeadWorks could be. And she said, hey, Dad, I think I want to stick with you. And she's now a partner in the company and has brought us some of our best clients. She amazes me every day. It's wonderful working with your daughter, growing a company. And, there's a 30-year gap between her and me. And which which brings some strengths and weaknesses. She looks at the world a whole lot differently than I do, and which is good. But she also has a lot of things she needs to learn, which I'm trying to teach her at the same time. And she kept pushing me, and she kept pushing. We got to get more people. We got to get the right people. What happens when you stop working? How are we going to design websites? How are we going to do lead magnets? How are we going to do this? How are we going to do that? Who's going to do the billing? So she was always worried about that. And, it wasn't until, 6 months ago that I have a financial coach who's helping me understand the business and my relationship between my personal finances and the business finances, and how and what I do when I want to get out of the business. That made me realize that I really need to build a team. I'm spending too much time working in the business, and I need to be working on the business. And I was spending 100% of my time in the business.
Yeah.
And had a nice small team. We have 6 people, and but still, I was doing a lot of work that was taking me away from the things I should be doing, which is growing the business, which is focusing on client relationships, on growth, rather than the tactical things that we do for our clients every day.
Mm-hmm. And you and I've talked about that. So you're now able to start, round out the team and start focusing on those things maybe you do best. So, where over the next 2 or 3 years, how do you see you kind of channeling your best skills to really drive top line or production?
Yeah, where I'm going to be spending most of my time is on business development and creating operational efficiencies. Those are, continuing to try and drive revenue, but also figuring out how to take all the technology that's out there and create incredible efficiencies that we can then pass to our clients. One reason our clients love us, we're a marketing firm, spend most of our time doing digital marketing, is that we're much less expensive than traditional marketing firms. And a lot of it is because we've built all this technology around us, and I'm constantly looking at ways on how to optimize that. How do we improve what we do so we can cut our costs and pass those savings on to the client, and still make a decent margin out of all that. So, but the business development side of things and just ongoing client relationships, that's where I need to be spending my time. And I worry that I don't spend enough of my time on the client relationships. And I worry that I'm going to need to get a call from a client who says, Scott, we're leaving you because I haven't heard from you in 6 months. And I think about the people I need to call today, or the people I need to email today and just connect with. But I get so wrapped up in the how rather than the who, that before I know it, it's 7:00 at night. I said, I'm not going to call them now. And those days turn into weeks, turn into months. And before you know it, I haven't spoken to a client in 6 months. And that concerns me.
Right. Someone named Mo Bonnell, for example, does make some great points about, when is the best time to reach out to a client? Well, now, right? Because otherwise you just keep kind of pushing it off indefinitely. So, I wanted to just go back to something you and I've discussed too. I think another key thing, and you're learning where you wanted to focus and whatnot, is handling customers maybe that aren't as profitable, right? And tell us a little bit about how you kind of were able to start kind of pruning the business and focusing on the most profitable opportunities, because that can be a transformative thing to top line, but more importantly, margin.
Oh, absolutely. Up until recently, if somebody had any money to spend, we figure out how to work for them. And it's like I used to tell people, I don't want your budget to be an obstacle of working with us. If you really want to work with us and we really want to work with you, we'll figure it out. And we held to that in the early days, and that was we grew because of that, but it was a lot of work for low margin clients. And what I learned was, the client that's paying us $500 a month actually demands more time and energy and attention than the client that's paying us $5,000 a month. The $5,000 a month client just seems to, we have a body of work, we pump it out. The client writes the check every month. We have a monthly meeting. He's happy, she's happy. They say, wow, you just keep doing what you're doing. That $500 a month client has incessant demands that they think that they're worthy of a $5,000 a month client. So, and I don't know if that's unique to us or if others.
No, it's not. It's not. It's so common. Yeah.
But it seems like the more revenue we get from a client, the easier that relationship becomes. And so we started looking at it. And again, one of the things is going through my coaching, I was told you need to find those clients that you need to fire. And so I started looking at those, and we have fired several. We've called them up and we said, this just isn't a good fit anymore. There's just, and I do my best to find them somebody else that they can work with. There's still a few that we need to prune out of it. But we've also set our targets on, we're just not going to take anybody anymore. And we said, unless somebody has $2,500 a month to invest in marketing programs, they're not a client for us. Mm-hmm. And hopefully in a year from now, 2 years from now, the floor will be $5,000. And we find those are the better clients. Those are clients who are very, very, very engaged with us, and we have great relationships. We're talking all the time, and those are the clients that are easier to grow financially. We start clients that come to us with a $2,000, $3,000 a month engagement. Before we know it, 6 months later, they're spending $7,000, $8,000, $9,000. Yeah. That $500 a month client is a $500 a month client because that's all they have to spend. It's a small local business, and they're never going to grow into a $2,000 a month client. They're just not. Yeah. And those are the ones. As much as I want to help small business people, because I'm a small business guy myself, you have to start looking at how much time you're investing versus what you're getting back. And I'll always, I always try to make sure that we're doing right by folks. And if that means that we have to get rid of them and so that they can get better product from somebody else who's focused on that size company, then that's what we have to do.
Well, I've been able to kind of watch you make this transformation a little bit, and it is interesting and transformative, right? I mean, you've been able to really lift the profitability and improve just listening to you talk about it. How the business works. Last question here. I mean, it is so hard to walk away from, because you're right. You have a heart that you want to give back. You want to help small business owners, and you rather say yes than no. Is it hard to walk away from people you want to help that don't fit the profitability mold?
Yeah, it is. But I keep remembering. I can't remember who told this to me. It may have been you, Ken, at one point. I don't know. They said if you want to grow, you have to prune the tree. And I never thought about it that way. But if you want your tree to grow, you have to constantly prune it. And we're out there every in the end of the fall pruning our trees, early spring pruning our trees, and so they'll bloom again. And we were never pruning anything. And so, I realized I have to do regular annual pruning if we want to keep growing. And because there's only so much I can ask my team to do. And I'm more concerned about my team being happy and liking the people that they work with. And those smaller clients aren't always the people that we like working with the most. So if we're not having fun, then that's even more of a deterrent to work with somebody. But yeah, sometimes I just hate telling people I'd love to help you, but I just can't help you.
Right. Well, so, we often try to frame what does that exit or that transition look like ultimately 17 years down the road. Sometimes you have to break it into near-term parts. So, for you, where do you see the business 3 years from now, 4 years from now, where you're kind of working toward?
Well, we're trying to grow our revenue in the next couple of years by 2 to 3x from what it is now, and add some people, allow us to add some people to that. My next hire, I'm getting ready to post a position as a virtual executive assistant, and a lot of people may say, "Wow, an executive assistant, is that what you really need?" And it's what I really need. I need somebody to manage all those emails, all the little projects that come through that end up on my plate. And I need somebody else to be dealing with those every day so that I can free myself up to do the things I really need to be doing. So, I'm working with my daughter. Ultimately, Whitney is going to run this company. This is going to be her company as long as she wants it to be her company. And so I'm trying to get her ready for that. Trying to teach her all the management things, the management principles, all the things that I've learned along the way about servant leadership and running companies and those sorts of things, as well as giving her the business acumen to understand the financial side of the business, to be able to look at P&Ls and balance sheets and those sorts of things and understand what they mean and know whether the company is healthy or not. So there's no easy way to do that. There's no entrepreneurial school that I can send her to. It's all, I got to just spend time in the trenches with her doing knowledge transfer. So it's really, top line growth, 2 to 3x more revenue in the next couple of years. We're trying to, our goal is to double the size of the company by 2026. And I think we're going to do that. I think we're going to exceed that. And truly by the end of this year, have people in place so that I'm focusing on being able to generate the growth that we're projecting, that we want to project.
That's great. That's awesome. And then, last lesson, even for Whitney, is the who, not how, right? So if there isn't a skill that she has, she needs to know about it. But right, how do you hire that person who can carry that for you? And I love your point about hiring an executive assistant who will free up your time. A lot of people say this isn't a revenue producing person, gosh, you go straight to the bottom line. Not really. If done correctly, that person is saving you time. So you actually spend your time growing the top line. So I think it's great to hear.
To that point, Cannon, I used to tell clients when we were pitching clients, I would tell them everybody who works for us provides work output for you. So you're not paying for account executives. You're not paying for a controller. We don't have any of that. Everybody on our team is actually producing output. I thought that was smart. I thought that was really smart. And I look back and I realized that wasn't so smart. That's actually kind of a dumb idea, because that meant that all those back office functions, like the things that an executive assistant can do, we didn't have that person, but our clients were still paying for it. They were paying for it for me to do it. I was doing
you're getting bogged down.
I was doing the project management every month. And so those costs do get passed. And if I'm doing it, the costs are much higher than if I have an executive assistant doing it. So in hindsight, it was just a really not a good strategy. I look back and I said, I wish I could take everything I've learned in the last couple of years and have had that knowledge 10 years ago when I started the company. Yeah. And we'd be a $10 million company right now. But hindsight is 2020.
Right, exactly. You'll get there. Well, let's pivot. I think one area in the marketplace that we've found we have mutual interest in overlapping is kind of that health space, and particularly some of the health services, including med spas, things like that. You've had a great background in healthcare. How have you gotten LeadWorks into that? Those verticals. Tell us how that journey went and kind of what you're seeing as the opportunity there.
When LeadWorks was really starting to do a lot of work, we moved from the B2B space to B2C, and so we were doing a lot of work for retailers. And I had, having a background in healthcare, the natural kind of move in a retail environment was retail medicine, which is plastic surgery, dermatology on the cosmetic aesthetic side, and med spas, and which have completely different challenges than if you're an internist, endocrinologist, where you're living off of insurance. Plastic surgeons and dermatologists are, largely, so I know some plastic surgeons that are 90 to 95% cash business and 5% insurance, and med spas are 100% cash business. So it kind of led us into that area. I had a lot of operational background in healthcare. I actually run a plastic surgery practice. It's a client of ours who asked me, because of my healthcare administration experience, to fill in for an administrator that they let go 10 years ago, and they never hired anybody. So I still run that virtually. So I understand the plastic space very, very well. I understand those challenges, and retail medicine is a interesting dynamic, because you're not just competing. If you're a plastic surgeon or a med spa that's offering Botox or cool sculpting, you're not just competing with the cool sculpting clinic down the street or the family practice doc who's now doing Botox injections. You're competing with the trip to Guatemala. You're competing with the large screen TV and the home theater. Yeah, right. You're competing with the new car purchase. So these are lifestyle decisions, and unfortunately, a lot of physicians, med spa owners in that space, they don't understand that. They don't understand that they are considered a luxury item, and they're not competing against others in their space. They're competing against other luxury items. Am I going to buy that Gucci handbag, or am I going to get some, four cycles of cool sculpting? Mm-hmm. And so, and that's the world we live in today.
Well, so, and obviously that feeds right into your sweet spot of, kind of strategic guidance and digital marketing and optimizing the marketing message there. So what are some of the lessons you learned about reaching those target markets and helping people make those decisions for those owners of, the medical services business you've talked about? What's the marketing lesson, the marketing secret? Well,
God, I wish there was a silver bullet for this, but there really isn't. A lot of it is just guerrilla marketing. You got to be doing the right stuff every day, and And you have to focus first. Quite honestly, it's an inside out approach. You first have to focus on the customer experience more than anything. If you're driving people to your med spa or your practice and they're waiting an hour to see the practitioner, or the person who greets them is a little bit surly that day, or the environment doesn't look like it's the Ritz-Carlton spa, it's all these things detract. So and word of mouth marketing is still the most powerful form of marketing there is. When you leave someplace, you decide whether it's a restaurant, your barber, whomever it might be, and you have a good experience or a bad experience, you tell people about it. And that's how LeadWorks has grown, by the way. All of our clients, with the exception of one, have come from client referrals. We have one organic client that found us. We didn't find them because we're not out there marketing on a regular basis. So I've learned that lesson myself. You have to have you got to develop relationships, and then those relationships will bring other relationships to the table. So you have to start internally. And unfortunately, you look at how some of these practices are run and that experience, and it's not, somebody's coming in and they're spending $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 with you. They're not getting the $5,000, $6,000, $7,000, $8,000 experience. And so that's really the biggest secret is start marketing internally first. Make sure everything is wonderful. Make sure the waiting room is awesome. If I were running a doctor's office or a med spa, I wouldn't have a waiting room. I'd figure out the process to get people right back into the room immediately without. Obviously, they may be bringing family members, so you need some place to park those people. But waiting rooms are designed to make people wait, and nobody wants to wait anymore.
Right, that's a good point. Yeah.
And nobody wants to wait anymore. So you got to figure out those things, and then there's so many things. When you're a med spa or a plastic surgeon or dermatologist, so much of it comes down to trust. Do people trust you with their care? Yeah. And there's so many good ways to build trust on the internet today. What we're doing today is one of those. You're building trust every time you do a podcast. People are listening to you and they say, wow, this is Carr. He sounds pretty smart. Maybe I ought to call him and talk to him about, some investment strategies and how they might manage my money. So you're not going to get any instant direct business off of a podcast, but you're building a brand and building trust that the more people who hear you and see you, eventually somebody says, wow, this guy really knows his stuff. I like his approach to business. And med spa owners can be doing the same thing. I mean, they could be doing webinars all the time. They could be doing little open houses. They could be doing meet and greets. They can be doing live feeds on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Yet they don't, because they're so busy, because so many of them suffer from the same malady that I suffer from, working in the business rather than on the business. They're so focused on, every plastic surgeon who's a client of ours, the plastic surgeon is 100% in the business. Rarely do I talk to someone. I've talked to their administrator, who is really there just to make sure somebody unlocks the door every day and locks the door at night. They're not a decision maker. So, they're so focused on working in the business. And same with med spa owners. Most med spa owners are estheticians who are seeing patients and driving revenue.
The practitioners,
and so they suffer
right?
From the absolute same malady that I've suffered from. And I try and coach. Now that I see the light, I'm trying to help others go through the same process, saying, hey, you gotta carve out some time, even if it's block out half a day every Friday to work on the business, and don't schedule patients then. You can't. And they all see the logic in it, and they all start that way. But then when the moment their schedule fills up and it's a question of, do I book the person on Friday morning or do I lose the patient? They elect to book the person on Friday morning, and they never get out of that grind of working in the business.
I know you've started setting aside a time periodically to say, I'm going to force myself to focus on the business, because you like actually doing that work. You're a very strategic thinker. But I think you've become deliberate in setting aside that time, correct?
Well, actually more deliberate. The first time we talked about this, Ken, I was blocking out Friday mornings. Now I block out all of Fridays. So if somebody goes to my scheduling link, Friday's not even available. Sometimes I get an email saying, "Oh, the only time I can meet with you is on Friday, and it doesn't look like you're available on Friday." I said, "Yeah, but I can. It is what it." And I refuse. I refuse to violate that. Friday's my time. That is my time at this point. And so
whereas 4 or 5 years ago, that wouldn't have been the case, right? You would have just said, "I'll just get to it later," right? And keep putting out the media.
Oh, absolutely. And later never came.
Yeah, no, it never does. Well, last question, just on the med area that you were talking about in plastic surgeons and medical services there, retail. They tend to be practitioners. So do they understand their balance sheets? Do they understand, kind of developing that long-term plan to build independence ultimately from the business? Or do they just assume, value be created and magic happens?
Yeah, I've talked to so many of them about this, and they're all worried about what their exit strategy is. Because if you're a plastic surgeon, specifically a plastic surgeon, there's not, outside of the Botox injections that you're doing, that people come back and do 3 times a year, there's not a lot of repeat business. You come in for a facelift, you're not coming in, you may come in for something else 4 or 5 years later, but it's not like a primary care office where you're going to see people, you got 3,000 patients and you're seeing them 4 times every year. Med spas are a little bit different. They're focused on that repeat business, getting somebody in there for that facial every month or every 2 months or a chemical peel, whatever it might be. But they still don't understand the exit strategy. And when they try and get out of the business, they realize they really can't get out of the business, that they are so entwined in the business that they're actually that because they are the business, they can't leave the business. Nobody will buy the business from them because and I had this happen to a friend of mine who was a client of ours in Buckhead who had a med spa, and she's like, God, I'm trying to get out, but I'm going to end up having to become an employee for a number of years before I can actually for somebody to buy my practice. Because she walked away from it, most of the clientele would walk away as well.
Not a long-term sustainable plan there.
Yeah, there was no sustainable plan. And there really, and unfortunately, doctors and estheticians who are running med spas were never trained on business. Medical schools should have some courses on business operations, business finance. So they don't really understand balance sheets, and they don't understand P&L statements. They don't understand, return on equity, and they're reliant on other people to tell them whether this is smart or it's not smart. You're doing well, you're not doing well, and they don't even know what questions to ask to challenge those assumptions. And so I get questions from doctors all the time. They said, I got this very high retained earnings on my balance sheet. Is that a problem? And because they don't know. So, and unfortunately, if you're running a physician office, depending on how many doctors you have, these could be $5, $10, $15, $20 million a year companies. So not having anybody really understanding the finances can really be challenging for those folks, especially in trying to figure out, how do I get out of the business? Plastic surgeons, like, what am I going to sell? I can't, if you're a primary care doctor leaving a business, you're selling your patient charts to somebody else to come in and take them over, because those patients are going to keep coming back. Plastic surgeon, you really have nothing to sell them. Mm-hmm. And so I know so many plastic surgeons, like, gosh, I don't have anything. I don't have any equity really in this. Everything I have is goodwill, and nobody seems to want to pay for goodwill anymore. Yeah.
Well, great point. So the difference between business success and financial success, and at some point those do need to become separate. And it's an interesting opportunity you've outlined. So certainly a lot of good work we can do there. Well, as we kind of wrap up the program, I had just 2 questions. The first one is, we in talking about business success, financial success, and those two are intertwined, and ultimately separating them out, is how you ultimately build some independence. What does financial independence mean to you when you think of financial independence from the business?
Oh, financial independence from the business is just being able to kind of exit the business and live a comfortable lifestyle, not have to. And I don't need to be a rich guy. I live on Hilton Head Island. I have a nice little place here. My wife and I enjoy it. We're a half a mile from the ocean, and just being able to stay here, and I don't need to be traveling the world when I retire, and I don't need a lot of things. I'm not a very materialistic person, so it's really just having the creature comforts that I have now, and the things that I'm surrounded with already. It's really nothing more than that. But beyond that, it's really having a company that once I do exit, it is very financially and operationally stable, so that my daughter doesn't have to worry about fixing things and picking up pieces that are broken that were never fixed along the way.
That's a great point. It can outlive you ultimately, right? You're not. You can be less involved and maybe not involved at all, and yet you've got the people and processes that keep serving clients in the way that benefits them in the future. So, well, last question. I love the fact that you're on a second or third career. Obviously, is it too late when you're over 50? Is it too late to start a third career?
Oh, it's never too late. The one thing I'm good at is pivoting, and I'll give you my 15-second career path. I was a sports writer coming out of college.
Yep.
Covered Clemson football and basketball, covered ACC. I went into public relations like many journalists do. I worked for a publicly traded insurance software company, went to an ad agency after that. Then I went to the Medical University of South Carolina as their PR director, which got me into healthcare. And I started moving through healthcare. I went to Alabama, where I was the vice president of marketing and strategy, then went to Savannah, where I was senior vice president, eventually became the COO. Left that, became a consultant, started a software company at the age of 49, got out of that at 53, started a digital marketing firm, and along the way started teaching at Winston-Salem State University as an adjunct professor. If an opportunity came along, I like to build things, as you can probably tell by that. I love building things. I don't like maintaining things. I get bored by maintaining things, the status quo. Mm-hmm. So if some opportunity comes along where I can build something and have fun doing it and have a financial return on it, I pivot. And so that's, and that may be a weakness of mine as much as it is a strength, my willingness to just go a different course. And because I get excited about new opportunities and new endeavors. And I hate to not be a part of something that I think could be really, really cool, that I have some talent to help build.
Yeah. That's awesome. Well, if people want to learn more about LeadWorks, how can they do that?
They can go to you go to our website. It's a very scant one-page website. It's leadworks.com with a dash between lead and works. You can certainly email me, scott@lead-works.com. More than happy to chat with folks, and send me an email, hit our website. Our website has a little connect with us form on there, so you can hit us that way as well.
Awesome. Well, Scott, it's been a great program. I've loved being able to kind of just hear about your journey, certainly in your own words, and how you've shown adaptability and strategic pivoting, and at the same time, sharing those lessons about who, not how, and being able to create focus for you so that you can double or triple your business over the next few years. So thanks for sharing those thoughts with us today.
Sure. Glad to be here, Cannon.
Absolutely.
All right, welcome back to the studio. Cannon and Claudia with you. Claudia, just a great episode.
Yeah, absolutely.
I had so much fun with it, and there's so many great things to learn. What was the one thing you really enjoyed the most, do you think?
It's been a lot of fun.
You know Scott, right?
Yeah, absolutely. We do. We work with Scott, and so it's been really fun to watch him on this business owner journey. Yeah. I used to email him to send out email blasts for me or fixing things on the website, and now he has people that do that for him. And so as a client, I think we've reaped the benefits of him working on the business rather than in it. Yeah. And it's been really, really cool to watch that change. Yeah, no, it's been fun working with Scott professionally on a number of levels here and watching that journey. Well, and that's a great lead in, right? So one of the things we wanted to highlight as a takeaway from this segment is what do you wish you knew 10 years ago when you started your business, right? And how do you unlearn some of those things that were kind of bad habits, but you were just getting started? And that first thing he talks about is as he transitioned into LeadWorks from his prior job, he had forgotten all those key things that he used to do so well. Yeah, absolutely. He said one of his strengths in his corporate career was that he knew how to surround himself with people that were really good at their jobs. Yeah. And he was good at the project management portion. And it seems like he kind of forgot that once he started LeadWorks. He was so busy working in the business and making sure clients are happy, he forgot to surround himself with that really stellar team. Yeah, he said, I didn't invest in people at the time. And the end result was that he was doing good work, right? But it wasn't scalable, and his growth was a lot slower. Exactly. And looking back on it, it was like, that was the trade-off. And frankly, starting to wear him out a little bit. Yep. So, such a key thing for him to realize. And he also, with that kind of reactionary start, he hadn't really started thinking about how is he going to exit the business, right? And again, we always encourage entrepreneurs to think, not literally exactly how you exit, but start thinking about what that milestone is and how do you get there? Because otherwise, reactionary things happen. So, that is such a key thing. And he has now started articulating what his succession plan is. Yeah.
So he's got something in place, and that's just wonderful. The other thing, or another thing that he said was interesting, was just how he learned to better use his time. Because he didn't start off using his time the smartest way, right? What was he best at?
No, he said that he was best at optimizing the delivery costs for client and doing the business development part. And he kind of lost that at the beginning and has just really started making time for it again.
Yeah, no, he's like, it's the 80-20 rule, right? And we talked to many entrepreneurs about this. If 80% of your value comes from 20% of your time doing something, do that 20% more. And for him, you're right, it's business development and it's understanding technology in the digital world and how to deliver that at the right optimal cost. And what's interesting too is he's using his time. He talked about some things now that he's doing in terms of just some basic practices that help him. So, for example, he's now starting to look into hiring a virtual executive assistant. That's going to free up time for him to do those things that are valuable.
Exactly.
He's also now, at one point, he and I were talking about him blocking off an early segment on Friday mornings. He says now he blocks off the entire day on Friday, so that he can focus on those things that are working on the business and move the business forward.
Right.
And he'd never done that before, right? It was always that next project just getting in the way. So it's just a great lesson. And then the third thing I thought we'd highlight is just how he did those things deliberately, some things that help deliberately improve growth and profitability. And one of those magic things is pruning unprofitable customers, right? Remember, he talked about $5,000 customer and the $500 customer, but there's a quote.
Yeah, he did. He said, if you want to grow, you have to prune the trees. And, he was saying he didn't know if you had said that or somebody else, but I think it really rings true as to how you reach that next stage of your business. Sometimes those lower end clients just aren't going to make it with you, but it makes room for the higher end ones.
Well, and he was so clear about that. He's like, the share of wallet for the $500 client is probably not going to increase.
Right.
And the time you spend on that client is usually more than the $5,000 client. So why not get more $5,000 clients who have more upside and take less of your time? Once you get that balance right, and in that you're defining what your ideal client is, right?
Exactly.
It's so important to know who you're going to serve best and then focus on that. Great lessons there. So those three things really helped him move the business forward. And then I loved in the program where we said, all right, so he said, I'm going to take what I learned there and apply it to some segments, including, the retail aesthetics space and the healthcare space, where there's so much similarities to what he had learned in his business to those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, he says one of the things that he really helps aesthetics businesses, specifically med spas, work on is viewing their business as a luxury good versus a necessity, and that has massive implications on their marketing side. And so having that understanding of where your business falls in the marketplace is really important.
Yeah. So, and that is transformative, right? So if you're in that aesthetic space, he talked about how, the waiting room becomes maybe something in the way, right?
Right.
How do you build that customer experience in the luxury sense and in the high end sense? You can't wait for an hour, right? And your waiting room experience can't be a poor one.
Yeah. Well, and then he also talks about, building that trust through the internet, through things like the podcast, through webinars and videos, and the difficulties of overcoming those things and that barrier,
Yeah. Well, and to do those things, though, you've got to stop working in the business.
Yep, exactly.
Business, right? So that frees up that deliberate time for webinars and things that add value as you move forward. So important. And then the other thing he's bringing to this industry is the concept of thinking about how you're going to exit. A lot of practitioners, like he was in the digital world, are just spending so much time in the business that they don't think 5 years ahead, 10 years ahead. How am I going to grow into something that is either saleable or something that creates a meaningful sense of monetary value? Because if you're not planning those things, they usually happen by accident. And particularly for practitioners, they're not able to leave the business by selling it because when they want to get out, the business is all about them.
Exactly.
And Scott learned his business was all about him until he started hiring people who free him up to do other things, but you start building a business underneath you that can continue. So So just great lessons, I thought, for his industry. And then just that final point that's just so interesting for us to explore is, financial independence and business independence,
Right.
Independence and financial success and business success. Those don't always go hand in hand. And we want to make sure, even if your business is not optimal,
Right.
you're still the financial success there. And Scott's doing those practices that help him ultimately build a business that ends up being bigger than him and rewarding at the same time. So, just a great episode. Claudia, I really enjoyed it as always, and we hope we get to see you on the next one.
Thank you for listening to today's episode. Are you looking for more resources to help your business? Visit cornercappodcast.com for our free ebooks to help you plan for inevitable transitions in your business. Tune back in every other week for a new episode.